Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. Today, I'm excited to bring to you another interview episode today with Katie Kimball of Kids Cook Real Food. In 2024, we are mixing up the podcast and doing about one interview episode a month. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the importance of getting kids in the kitchen. You know, this is something I am a fan of at the Schaaf household. I have been following Katie's work for several years now. If you're on the Prep Dish newsletter, you've likely seen me talk about, she has a knife skills course and all sorts of different courses and tools for getting kids involved in the kitchen. That's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. But I also wanted to mention that she has an annual life skills summer camp. It's free. It starts on June 24th, but it's already available to register, to sign up. I have a link in the show notes if you're interested in that. It is a week-long camp with over 70 experts, including moi, and over 100 video workshops. It teaches all sorts of life skills for kids ages 5 to 18, as well as their parents. So my topic is going to be on how to prep a week of dinners with little ones at home. But there's a lot of topics, not just food and cooking related, practical life skills like how to pack a suitcase, useful tech habits, all sorts of things. So if you are interested in that, again, there is a link to register in our show notes. It doesn't kick off until June 24th, 2024. So as long as you're listening between the date that this episode airs and that time, you should be able to use that link to sign up. And then the second reminder is that if you have not tried out the Prep Dish meal plans, I have an email to read from Prep Dish customer Megan. Megan says, "Prep Dish has saved my sanity on numerous occasions. I can't imagine mealtime in my house without it. We have tried many new ingredient and flavor combinations, and we've been pleasantly surprised by several of the recipes. I tell every busy mom I know about it. Thank you for all that you do." Thank you, Megan, for sharing. And if you are listening to this and have not tried out our meal plans, I encourage you to go to prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday, and you can get 2 weeks free. That'll be 14 days where you'll have a login. You can log in and look through all of the different meal plans that we offer, try it out in your house, see how it works, see how much time it saves, how much thinking it takes away from you. Just go ahead and go to prepdish.com/MPM if you want to try those out. So, and again, both of those links for the Life Skills Summer Camp, the Prep Dish trial are going to be found in the show notes if you need access to those. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. Hi, I'm so excited to be here with Katie Kimball of Kids Cook Real Food today. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Allison, so good to chat with you.
I am very excited. I have always been such a fan of the work you do. I'm, of course, a fan of getting kids in the kitchen. So for today, I thought we'd kind of start out with kind of the why of getting kids in the kitchen, and then from there, move on into the how, because I know you're really good at both of those. So, but maybe to start out with just a quick little intro of you and your background.
Sure thing. I am a teacher by training. Since I was in kindergarten, I knew I wanted to teach at elementary school. And I did that for just 2 years and then started our family. And I also knew that I could not full-time teach and full-time mom and do both well. So I've been, at home and then ultimately building this business online to help families stay healthy without going crazy, to help kids build confidence in the kitchen. We've been teaching over 20,000 families around the world to cook since 2016. And I'm in a new phase of parenting now because I have 4 kids. My youngest is in 3rd grade. I've got a middle schooler, I've got a high schooler, but I've got this kid who's now out of high school. So it's completely game changer. He's actually taken a gap year building his own business and, just figuring out life. But I'm in this parenting handbook part 2, how to raise an adult in your house now.
Awesome. Good for you. I will be calling you up in several years. But great. And tell me a little bit more. So when it comes to getting kids in the kitchen, why is that important? Or why is that even something people should be working towards?
There are so many roadblocks, many, psychological for us moms and dads too. And I hear people say all the time, like, "Oh my gosh, Katie, kids, they're just so slow. Like they're so messy. I don't even like cooking at all. I've been in a big conversation in my community this weekend about how much people just don't find joy
Mhm.
in cooking. And so, if that's how we're feeling, like we got to get it done, we got to get through it, we just got to flip and get some food on the table. Like this is not something we want to invite our kids into,
Mhm.
naturally. For a lot of us, it doesn't come naturally. So I do think starting with the why is really important because we've got a parent with the end in mind, and like I said, I have an 18-year-old. He does make dinner for the family once a week. He made homemade chili for us yesterday, and that freed up an hour to an hour and a half in my life, so there's
Mhm.
hope there. There's some practicality. And I've always sort of looked at my kids that way, like what kind of adult do I want them to become? What do I want them, to be able to focus on when they are adults? And so when I think of your kids, my kids, when they're going after college or whatever they're doing after high school, I really want them to be finding love, like figuring out their career, like moving forward in life and not having to spend so much time going, oh my gosh, how do I grocery shop? What do I buy? How do I chop an onion? You know what I mean? Like that's a lot of mental load and mental energy.
Mhm.
So in my book, if we can give them those skills when they're under our roof, when failure is not such a big deal, right? We're here to catch them with our net and help them along in a practical sense. We want to raise kids who can cook for themselves because if they're going to be healthy, you either got to be really rich or be able to cook for yourself, right? Otherwise, it's cheap processed foods. And to me, that's not an acceptable answer. So, very practical to think about, your adult kids. It is also very practical to want a little bit of help in the kitchen, that
Mhm.
potentially sharing that load, sharing that responsibility could bring more joy into the process of cooking for we parents who are we're working really hard to raise kids physically. We're working really hard emotionally to raise them too. And that's where I started out. I wanted my kids to be great adults. I wanted a little help in the kitchen. And after working with so many thousands of families, we've actually seen far more benefits. So if those aren't enough, if that's not enough motivation, we just find that the confidence that kids build in the kitchen, it actually does apply to all areas of life. Like self-esteem is one bucket. So if your
Mhm.
self-esteem is up because you can feed another human being, right? Because you can do authentic skills in the kitchen, your self-esteem is up. It's up in sports, it's up in academics, it's up in your social life. So anything we can give our kids where they are competent, it's incredible for them to increase that self-esteem. And then we see the connection between kids and their food, which is really important when we're talking about maybe picky eaters, the
Mhm.
connection between kids and their family. Like that's where we have my kids and I have some of the best conversations is when we're working shoulder to shoulder, getting dinner on the table, no screens, no distractions. It's just a really important special time. And lastly, the creative action of working with your hands is so important.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And, that last piece, I think even for adults, you were saying that you were having conversations of adults not being excited to be in the kitchen. But I think it's important throughout our lifetime to have that connection. And, what better age to start than as early as possible. And the thing that I've noticed is I'm having younger kids starting to get into, schooling and schooling options. And it's such a piece that's overlooked in most educational systems, depending on, what path they're going down. And so I think it's one that it really is important to foster in the home. And it really is, for the most part, going to fall on learning that at home. So moving on from the why and the importance of getting kids in the kitchen, how do you go about that? Is there like a certain age? Is there a certain, method, or what are all your tricks?
Yeah, we'll talk about age first. I really like to get tools in the hands of kids at 18 months or 2 years old, which sounds really young, but it's so important to capture that intrinsic motivation. Between about the ages of 2 and 5, kids are in the phase of, Mama, can I help? Daddy, I want to do what you do, right? Like they still think we're cool.
Mhm.
At that age, you got to capture it then. There were actually some sociologists who went to other countries and they were asking children, I can't remember what their original intent was, but they were asking children about what they do after school. These kids are like, oh, I do laundry, I cook meals for my family, and like all of these household chores. And these American researchers kind of looked at each other like, this is not what happens in our country. This is really different. So then they started digging into might be causing that discrepancy between American kids and kids in other countries. And what they decided, they theorized, is that it was giving the kids responsibilities early when they still had intrinsic motivation, and allowing them to have knives and whatever else, like real tasks. Whereas in America, we tend to kind of shoo them away when they're little, when they're not practically helpful. And by the time they're 8 or 10 and we're saying, hey, do you want to learn how to cut a cucumber? You want to be helpful? They're like, no. I mean, first of all, the intrinsic motivation's gone, but we've also rewired some neural pathways saying, I don't need you. You don't belong in the kitchen. We may not say it with our words, but by our actions, we're kind of teaching them that the kitchen is not the place for them. So starting young, super important. It's not, do or die. If you've got a kid who's 13 and has never cut a carrot or measured a teaspoon of salt, that's okay. It's possible, but just, man, if you've got a little one, like, capture that time. When we think about how to do it, I think the most important mindset shift for parents to understand is that teach your kids to cook is not the item you put on your to-do list, right? That's a boulder. That's huge. We need pebbles on our to-do list. So you just think, what is one small building block, right? Cooking is really just all these tiny, tiny, tiny little skills. And so if your kid knows nothing, cut a banana with a butter knife, right? That's your pebble. Or measure a teaspoon of salt. That's your pebble. Let the child put their hand on top of yours while you crack eggs, just so that they feel involved and have that connection with their parents, and they're learning the pressure that you use to crack an egg, so that when you give them their own egg, they don't go all over the counter. So I really encourage parents to mindset shift and think of, what are the tiniest chunks, the tiniest building blocks that I can teach my child. The other mindset shift is a time thing. So this is not a do, it's a do not. Do not try to teach your kids anything in the kitchen right before dinner. Right? Everybody knows that is the most stressful time of day. Of course, you cannot slow down and teach a child something. But it's unfortunately when they ask, right? If they are still in that asking to help phase. So the answer is a yes and. Can I help? Yes. And you need to build some skills. So tomorrow, right after snack, after school, I'm going to teach you how to measure something. And then tomorrow evening for dinner, you can measure all the ingredients, right? See how that separates the stressful time from the teaching. And the kids could actually, children could actually measure any like seasoning that you need for dinner at 4 p.m. You might not be wanting to walk, into the kitchen. Or again, if you're full-time working, we're talking Saturday mornings, Sunday afternoons, like do it right after they've eaten. They're in the eating space. They're well fed. They're happy. You're going to teach a little 10-minute, let me show you how to do this. And then hopefully right away, they can do something that then contributes to the family. Then here's where the magic happens. And we start to create the snowball effect. When the child learns one thing, and that one thing, and this is for kids ages 2, 12, probably 22. I don't have one of those yet, but like, this is how humans work, right? We want to contribute. We want to feel involved. So I learn one skill, figure out how to incorporate that skill into an upcoming meal, snack, recipe, right? And then when the family eats that meal, this is where it sounds a little different if they're 2 or 12, but if you've got a 3 or 5-year-old who has measured the oregano, for your Italian dinner, you say, oh goodness, this tastes so good. It's the seasonings in here. Who measured the seasonings? I just love, this is so great, and then the child's beaming and they feel confident. And guess what that makes, creates in them? Motivation to learn more. Right. And they come back in, obviously, again, different words. If you're 12, you'd be like, oh man, this is really good. I'm so glad I had a partner on that. Thanks for measuring the oregano. You know what I'm saying? It's less, it's more downplayed when they're 12. But everyone likes to feel as if they've contributed. Everyone likes to contribute and feel involved. And it works for all ages.
Yes. And spouses.
It's so true that in that conversation that we're having with parents, what I asked was, if you hate to cook, if you say you hate to cook, like what's going on there? And like 125 responses. I thought, oh, that struck a nerve. And there were lots, obviously 125 answers, but in the categories, there was a decent showing of people who said, it's just, I don't feel appreciated. Nobody cares. And I thought, oh, like, yeah, first of all, we as the cooking adults need to feel appreciated, but we gotta think about that. Like when we're getting our kids in the kitchen, they want to feel appreciated too. So we can really use that to our advantage.
Yeah, no, my 4.5-year-old twice this week has told me, this is the most delicious meal. You make the best food. And I mean, I don't even know where he picked it up from, but I'm telling you, I was a little more motivated to go make dinner last night because whatever it is this week, he's been just so appreciative of the food and the meals. And I just want it to go on forever. It's so nice to be appreciated.
I love it. Yeah, that attitude of gratitude, if you can
Yeah.
cultivate that, within the family, whoever's cooking gets compliments, so powerful.
Yeah. So, a question that I know is going to come up. So, you've got the kids in the kitchen. Are there any safety concerns that you worry about?
I don't worry. I
Okay.
am cautious, right? Like, of course, we're cautious, but they say worry is like a rocking chair. You rock and don't get anywhere. So let's just decide not to worry.
Yep.
And, what do we do? So, knives, obviously, there's an inherent danger there. Kids and adults injure themselves cutting up onions all the time. But when trained well, and when you're using the right knife for the size of hand and the right food to the right knife, which are
Mhm.
all things that we teach in our classes, you can have a pretty high level of confidence that things aren't going to go incredibly poorly, And the thing is, if you need a band-aid, if you have a little cut, hopefully most people don't have to go to urgent care or anything. They're
Yeah.
minor, but it's an opportunity to teach the kid to get back on the horse. That yeah, this is scary and that's why we need to respect the sharpness of the knife,
Mhm.
but it's also not world ending, you know? And so it's that learning from failure and pushing through adversity is actually what we want for our kids. If we never let them do anything dangerous, they're not going to have resilience when they are inevitably teased by other kids who are mean, when they
Mhm.
get a grade that's imperfect, right? Like they are going to have failures. And so we actually do want as parents to create those opportunities to do things that are a little bit dangerous. So we do have actually I would love to give your listeners our knife skills class. It's a 10-minute class, applies to butter knives all the way to chef's knives, 2 to teen. And they can find that at kidscookrealfood.com/meal prep Monday and just use it with your kids and they'll learn 4 ways to hold the food, 3 ways to hold the knife with really fun kid-friendly phrases. So that's the answer is just yes, it's dangerous, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I've seen that knife skills class. So I've gone through some of the different holding things, and I have a 3-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. The kind of the rule where they always help out is they have fruit for their snack in the morning, and they know that they can grab the cutting board, they have a knife, and they go up. And it's interesting how they have confidence. And you mentioned the worry, and even if sometimes I'm like, "Ugh," I try not to let them see that. Like we've gone over the basics, but they have the confidence. So I just let them keep that confidence because I think as parents, it's too easy for us to get in that way. And, as long as they've kind of learned the skill and they continue to practice it, then they're good. It's sometimes more, I think, a mental game for us as a mom to make sure we're continuing to garner that confidence.
It's true. And you've seen that class. We teach the same skills with butter knives as with chef's knives. And I think that does a few things. One, it teaches kids to respect a knife, whether it's sharp or not, because technically, you never know. And so I think that's a really good posture to have that knives are to be respected and treated in a certain way. It creates an unbroken line of technique from those butter knives at age 2 to the chef's knives. And like my child number 3, my son John, when he was 7, he came to me and said, I would really like to learn the big knife now, Mom. 7, like he was in 2nd grade, but he did great because he'd been using a paring knife for 2 years at that point. So there's this progression. And that's one thing that I might say as a practical tip is if you've got those plastic serrated kid safe knives, I would ditch those because they cause the kids to use a different hand motion
Mhm.
than with an actual knife. And it kind of, it also, it teaches them not to respect the
Yeah.
knife as being sharp, right? It's so easy to just be flippant about it and
Mhm.
instead of being cautious. And so I would rather see real metal in the hands of the kid.
I've wondered about that, actually, that very thing. So thank you for pointing that out. I've wondered about those little serrated plastic ones. So
Mhm.
very good point. Okay, well, as we wrap up on today's episode, any other final tips or words of wisdoms for parents looking to get their kids more involved in the kitchen?
Just that it's really, really worth it. Just like these parents I've been chatting with who are not finding joy in food, and some of them though, the answers that are a little more robust, they would say, I don't find joy, but I'm not going to go buy processed foods. Like this is too important to me. And I think we can recapture our motivation by parenting with the end in mind, by thinking about our kids' bodily health, by thinking about their confidence levels. Like, oh my gosh, we're in such a self-esteem crisis right now. Like, what if teaching your kid to cook was the key to raising their self-esteem? Like that would change every area of their lives. And you would say that, you know what? That was a simple parenting decision. Measuring a teaspoon of salt, cutting a banana. Like these are the pebbles, right? And all these little pebbles can really fill up their tank, fill up their jar of confidence. So I want to say it's very, very worth it for your kids. It's also worth it for the family. Like I said, I have 3 kids now who are meal ready, which means I get 3 nights out of 7 off. I don't know if you're doing the math, but I'm sitting pretty good here. And I don't even mind. Dishes are my least favorite thing. I don't even mind doing dishes when my kids have cooked
Yeah.
because it's a totally different feel, right? So, yeah, it even makes dishes better. Sit with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is amazing. I really appreciate you kind of creating that vision because I know in the moment, yes, there's going to be spills or sometimes it's hard, but I think having that vision of do you want the family where you're the one cooking or, all the time and the kids are just sitting there waiting, or could you have this vision of this family that does it together or takes turns, and, what's your long-term goal here? So I really appreciate you kind of helping us to visualize that in our minds. And yeah, it's just so awesome. Where can people find you? So the knife skills class, I will make sure that's linked in the show notes and everything too. I really recommend people checking that out. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, kidscookrealfood.com is where we live. That's where we teach parents about not only just teaching their kids to cook, but other ways to kind of keep your kids healthy and making really intentional parenting choices.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Katie. Always fun to talk with you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you to Katie for coming on the podcast today. I just am such a fan of her work. Again, you can check her out. She has that free life skills camp that's coming up on June 24th. If you are interested in checking that out, we have a link in the show notes. Another reminder that if you are wanting to try out the Prep Dish meal plans, we have that 14-day free trial set up at prepdish.com/MPM. And then one last thing, if you are a longtime listener of this podcast and have not left a rating and review, I really appreciate those. They help other people to find the podcast and the work that we're doing. So if you have a few minutes today, I would so appreciate that. That is all I have for this week. I will be back again next Monday with another episode.